Hare Krishna, welcome. So today we are going to study chapter 20 of the third canto. Topic for today is Brahma populates the universe, right? So now Brahma will work. Now we will see how Brahma finally created the species and populated the universe. Okay, let me put here first slide. So at the end of the previous chapter, right, chapter 19, the narration returned to Sutta Goswami. So Sutta Goswami speaking to Saunaka Rishi and the other sages in Naimisharanya. Actually, of course, the whole Bhagavatam is spoken by him, right? So Sutta Goswami is speaking the whole Bhagavatam, right? It's just that during the narration, the focus changes to Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, Maitreya and Vidura, and other great sages and great devotees in different parts of the text. But actually, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami is speaking there in Naimisharanya. So, it's also important to remember that a few chapters ago, when Maitreya described the appearance of Lord Varaha, he amalgamated, right? He combined the two pastimes. So he described both the appearance of the white Varaha during the reign of Swayambhuva Manu, right? The first Manvantara, and also the appearance of the red Varaha during the reign of Chakshusha Manu, the sixth Manvantara. So he combined both pastimes in just one description. So the first appearance of Lord Varaha in the first Manvantara was described like in the 13th chapter, right? Few weeks ago for us. And after that, the narration jumped to the sixth Manvantara, right? With the description of Jaya and Vijaya being cursed, and then taking birth as demons, and then Lord Varaha in his second appearance, the fight with Hiranyaksha, and so on. So now in the 20th, in chapter 20, the narration returns to the first Manvantara, right? So we had this time shift. We started on the first Manvantara, creation of Brahma, and so on. Then we jumped to the sixth Manvantara, and now we will go back to the first Manvantara. So now we will have more details of the creation of Brahma, the reign of the first Manu, Swambhuva Manu, the description of the marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, the appearance of Lord Kapila. Then we will spend a few weeks studying in detail the Sankhya philosophy of Lord Kapila, his instructions, which is quite amazing. It describes everything about life, about the universe, and about devotional service. And then later we have the appearance of Prithu Maharaja and so on. And all of this it was in the first Manvantara. So in reality, right, if we want to be, exact, in reality, Jaya and Vijaya, they were cursed in the fifth Manvantara, but they took their births on the sixth Manvantara. But this is just a small detail, right? So some believe that instead of two separate appearances, Lord Varaha, he appeared only once, right, in the first Manvantara, coming out of the nostril of Brahma. Then he lifted up Bhumandala, right? And then he waited inside the water until the sixth Manvantara to perform his second pastime, right, of fighting Hiranyaksha. Prabhupada, he doesn't disregard this possibility. He says that everything is possible for the Lord. So maybe or may not, right? We don't know. But there is this possibility. And just to refresh our memory, here is a list of the seven first Manus, right up to Vaisvata Manu, that is the current Manu. And it's useful to memorize this small table because the different pastimes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, they are connected with different Manvantaras. And without understanding this chronology, the pastimes, they appear to be just random. They appear to be just like random stories without connection between themselves. But when we understand this connection of the different stories with the different Manvantaras, then you see that there is a chronology on the Srimad Bhagavatam that starts with the creation of the universe and goes all the way to the current days, to the current time, and then also other things from the future are described, right? So we have the table here, right? And you can see that the naming parentheses for each Manvantara is the name of the incarnation of God who appears in each. So, for example, the Lord appeared as Yaga, the son of Swayambhuva Manu, in the first Manvantara, and there he assumed the post of Indra and he did other pastimes. Later, he appeared as Lord Vamanadeva in the current Manvantara, right? These pastimes of begging the 3 steps of land from Bali Maharaj and so on. And similarly, you have Vibhu, Satyashena, Hari, Vaikuntha. These are all incarnations of the Lord who appear in these different Manvantaras. Okay. So then we have second slide, questions of Saunaka Rishi and Vidura. So in the 10th chapter, it starts with Saunaka Rishi inquiring about Swayambhuva Manu, right? So he bringing back the discussion to the first Manvantara. So he says, first verse of the chapter, Sri Saunaka inquired, O Sutta Goswami, after the earth was again situated in its orbit, what did Swayambhuva Manu do to show the path of liberation to persons who were to take birth later on, right? Unquote. So that was the question, and then the next. So then, from verse 2 to 5, Saunaka he inquires about Vidura. Vidura was born from Vedavyasa, and he rejected life in the palace, right, because of the intrigues of Duryodhana. And he purified himself, by going on pilgrimage to the holy places. And finally, he had the opportunity to meet with Uddhava and later with Maitreya. So Saunaka was anxious to hear more about this. So he asked, what more did Vidura inquire from Maitreya, right? And of course, Sutta Goswami is very happy to answer. So he says, these are verses 8 to 11. Quote, Vidura, the descendant of Bharata, was delighted to hear the story of the Lord, who having assumed by his own divine potency the form of a boar, had enacted the sport of lifting the earth from the bottom of the ocean and indifferently killing the demon Hiranyaksha. Vidura then spoke to the sage as follows. Since you know of matters inconceivable to us, tell me, O holy sage, what did Brahma do to create living beings after evolving the Prajapatis, the progenitors of living beings? Vidura inquired, how did the Prajapatis, such progenitors of living entities, such as Marichi and Swayambhuva Manu, create according to the instruction of Brahma, and how did they evolve this manifested universe? Did they evolve the creation in conjunction with their respective wives? Did they remain independent in their action, or did they all jointly produce it? Right? So, okay, that's the question. And then we go to the next stage, a new description of creation. Okay, there is this description here, and then we will have one more later on the teachings of Lord Kapila. And we may be asking, why so many descriptions? Or every 2-3 chapters we have a description of creation. But later on the teachings of Lord Kapila, it will be clarified why we have so many descriptions and why it's described in this way. We will see how everything comes together. For now, we will study one by one. So, okay, new description of creation. So in verses 12 to 16, Maitreya, he repeats very shortly the process of primary creation that we already studied in the previous chapters. So Pradhana, right? We have the Pradhana, the unmanifested sum of all material elements. So this Pradhana was agitated by the look of Mahavishnu. And from this undifferentiated mass of matter, the 3 modes of material nature became apparent. And this mass was converted into the Mahatattva, right? Remember that Pradhana is when everything is mixed. Mahatattva is when the elements, they start to differentiate, to appear. So then, right after the appearance of the three modes, by the influence of the time energy, the false ego was created, and it was followed by the five material elements, together with the objects of the senses, and so on, right? We studied this already. And these subtle material elements, oops. So the subtle material elements, they combined in the form of the shells of the different material universes, which laid lifeless on the causal ocean for a long time, until the lords entered there as Garbhodakashai Vishnu, right? So that's what gave like life to this universe, because originally it was just shells of the universe. But when the Lord entered there, as Garbhodakashai Vishnu, then the universes, they became alive. So the material universe is created due to the desire of the conditioned souls to lord over the material energy, right? That's the reason of the creation of the universe. It's not that the Lord needs it, it's because of us. So at the end of each cycle of creation, the subtle bodies of the souls, they are destroyed, right? And they enter into Mahavishnu to rest, right? However, because the souls, or us, right, because we are not satisfied with our material desires, then a new cycle of creation is later necessary. And this continues indefinitely, right? As long as there are souls in the material nature desiring something, the Lord has to create the material universe time after time. And so this is going indefinitely. It's not possible to trace when this began, right? And at each cycle of creation, some of the conditioned souls, they go back to Godhead, right? But because the number of conditioned souls is basically unlimited, then the process basically never ends, right? However, the material world is not created by us, by the conditioned souls. It is created by a superior force. And this is indicated by the words Daivena, right? In verse 12. Daivena means by superior arrangement. So this means that although the material world is created for the enjoyment of the conditioned souls, there is a superior controller behind it, right? The Lord is behind this creation. And Prabhupada mentions something very interesting in his purport. He says, quote, "The material creation exists for the conditioned soul who wanted to become a false lord for sense enjoyment. One cannot trace out the history of when the conditioned soul first desired to lord it over material nature. But in Vedic literature, we always find that the material creation is meant for the sense enjoyment of the conditioned soul. There is a nice verse which says that the sum and substance of the conditioned soul's sense enjoyment is that as soon as he forgets his primary duty to render service to the Lord, he creates an atmosphere of sense enjoyment, which is called Maya. And that is the cause of material creation, right? Unquote. So somehow or other, right, the soul turns his back to his eternal position as a servant of the Lord and desires to enjoy the material nature, right? And because of this, the Lord has to create the material world. And it is not possible to trace when this started. Therefore, the process is considered like to be eternal. It's not literally eternal, but it's considered to be eternal because it's not possible to count. So the cycles of creation and destruction of the material universes, they have been going on since time immemorial, and there is no end in sight, right? So that's it. So from the novel of Garbhodakashai Vishnu, right now inside of each universe, sprouted the universal lotus flower containing all the material elements. And from this lotus flower, Brahma appeared, right? This we also studied. And it is described that the Lord entered the heart of Brahma. And by this presence of the Lord, Brahma got the intelligence to create the universe, right? So this describes the Lord present in his heart as Paramatma, right? Empowering him to perform the service of creating the universe. So the look of Mahavishnu injects all conditioned souls into the material energy, right? Into this total mass of material energies. And then from there, the souls they are divided into different groups who will enter these different universes, right? So the souls that are going to participate in the creation of a particular universe, they enter it together with Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, right? Garbhodakashayi Vishnu takes the whole group there. And then the souls, together with the material elements, also their material desires, their karma, etc., they stay for some time in the region of the belly of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and when they become agitated, right, desiring to perform material activities, then the belly of the Lord, it starts looking bluish. And at this point, the lotus flower appears, like the lotus flower sprouts, and this lotus flower is described as being extremely effulgent, like 1,000 blazing suns, right? Because it contains all the souls who will be part of this creation. So in his purport, Prabhupada explains why it's so brilliant, so effulgent. So, quote, it appears from this verse that the conditioned souls who rested within the body of the personality of Godhead after the dissolution of the last creation came out in the sum total form of the lotus. This is called Hiranyagarbha. The first living entity to come out was Lord Brahma, who is independently able to create the rest of the manifested universe. The lotus is described here as effulgent, as the glare of 1,000 suns. This indicates that the living entities, as part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also of the same quality, since the Lord also diffuses his bodily glare known as Brahmajyoti, right? So the souls also have some effulgence. So when the souls combine in this lotus flower, the lotus flower becomes very effulgent. So how do the conditioned souls remember their material desires in the previous creation if their subtle bodies were destroyed? Good question, right? Because the desires, they are part of the mind. The memory is part of the intelligence. So if both are destroyed, how is that the souls can remember their material desires from the previous creation? So the answer is that the Lord remembers and he recreates their subtle bodies and karma at the beginning of the next cycle of creation. And in this way, the Lord allows them to continue their material activities from where they stopped, right? So the soul has free will, right? And this free will leads the soul to somehow preserve his desire for lording over the material nature and continue to reject his eternal position of service to the Lord, millennium after millennium, right? Even when the subtle body is destroyed, still the soul continues to desire to act materially, right? So even at the end of the creation, when the subtle bodies of the souls are destroyed, they don't become liberated, right? So that's sad, right? And Prabhupada explains this mysterious point in his purport to 320:17. So I will read here. Quote, at a certain time, the personality of Godhead, Karanodakashayi Vishnu, lies in the Karana ocean and produces many thousands of universes from his breathing. Then he enters again into each and every universe as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and fills up half of each universe with his own perspiration. The other half of the universe remains vacant, and that vacant region is called outer space. Then the lotus flower sprouts from his abdomen and produces the first living creature, Brahma. Then again, as Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, the Lord enters into the heart of every living entity, including Brahma. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter. The Lord says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and by me are remembrance and forgetfulness made possible. As the witness of the activities of the individual entities, the Lord gives each one remembrance and intelligence to act according to his desire at the time he was annihilated, in his last birth in the last millennium. This intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma, right? Haribo. And then back to the current day of Brahma, right? So now, uh, so so this brings the talk back to the beginning of the current day, right? Because we went to the sixth Manvantara, then the first Manvantara. Now we go back to the very beginning of the current day of Brahma. So Maitreya will continue his answer now, revealing a few more details about the process of creation of Brahma. These are details that we didn't study before. These are new details about creation. So when Brahma woke up at the beginning of the current day, there was just darkness, right? So everything had to be recreated from the material elements stored in the lotus flower from which he was born, right? So this process continued all the way to the creation of Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Satarupa, right? So it is described how Brahma created different species like the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, the demigods and demons, Gandharvas, Apsaras, ghosts, spirits, the Sajas, the Pitas, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Kimpurushas, Kinnaras, Nagas, and so on, as well as the Manus, the great sages, and so on. So all these different species, they came from different states of consciousness of Lord Brahma. Like they appeared from different parts of his body and also from different states of his consciousness. So the first creation of Brahma was the ignorance that covers all the conditioned souls and makes them identify with matter, right? That was the first thing. And this was already described previously, but now more details are given. So there are 5 types of covering of ignorance, right? And these 5 coverings, they delude the souls and they prevent them from reconnecting with their original spiritual nature. So I will explain one by one. So first one is Tamishra, right? Tamishra is anger or envy, right? So under this covering, the soul forgets his constitutional nature and desires to compete with the Lord, becoming a false enjoyer of the material world. And although Tamishra also applies to general anger and envy of other living beings, the origin of this anger and envy like the origin of this, right, is this anger and envy towards the Lord. It starts from there. So by envying God as the ultimate controller and enjoyer, we also envy other people who have more than us, right? So become something like general. So this envy leads to anger, and anger makes us fall even deeper into ignorance, right? So yeah, so see that how it works. So it's important to note that this hatred of God, it doesn't come from the soul, but from this conditioning by Tamishra, right? Originally, the soul develops some kind of reluctance of serving Krishna, and from this, the soul comes in contact with the with material energy, and then from this contact with the material energy, then the soul can gradually, because of his free will, fall more and more under the control of material energy, right? And under the control of this Tamishra. And then this enviness of God appears and increases up to the point of the soul becoming a demon or an atheist and so on. So that's the first covering, Tamishra. Then we have Andata Mishra. And the Andata Mishra means I'm the body and that is the end of everything, right? I'm the body and that's all it is. So once one falls under this type of ignorance, one becomes very propense to commit sinful activities because he doesn't believe that he will be punished by it, right? For it. Because if one believes that there is no hell, there is no karma, there is no afterlife, no, you die and that's the end, then one becomes free. One feels free to do anything and everything to enjoy his senses, right? No matter how sinful. And this condition of Andata Mishra is due to the next covering, tamas, right? That's C, tamas. Tamas is the ignorance of one's constitutional position as a soul. Person forgets that. And this is the origin of the Andata Mishra and the other coverings, right? Starts from here. Forgetfulness that of our constitutional position. As Prabhupada explains, he says that, quote, almost everyone is thinking that he is this body. He has no information of the spirit soul. Guided by this misconception, one always thinks, this is my body, and anything in relationship with this body is mine. For such misguided living entities, sex life is the background of material existence. And then we have number 4, moha. So moha means attachment and sense of possession for things connected with the body, right? This is mine, right? So this includes material possessions, relatives, society, country, and so on. And this sense that I am this body and everything that belongs to this body is mine, right? This is this is moha, right? So this starts with sex life and is also increased by sex life, right? So that's why, the more a person goes into sex life, the more a person tends to become conditioned by this sense of possession that I am this body, right? This is mine. So because of this false sense of proprietorship, sectarian societies, families, nationalities, all these things, they are created and they fight with one another, right? All because of this false sense. And then we have number 5, Mahamoha. Mahamoha means madness after sense enjoyment, when a soul literally goes crazy. So the basic mechanism that we use to enjoy the world is the mind, right? The mind stores impressions, images, and based on that, the mind desires different material objects. And the more we become involved with material enjoyment, the more strongly the mind desires these things, to the point that one becomes like mad, really. So that's why the Vedas allow sense enjoyment only under certain restrictions. For example, food only as prasada, sex life only inside marriage, and so on. Because if we don't follow these regulations, we don't put limits on sense gratification, then we risk falling under this mahamoha and becoming mad after sense gratification, right? So, yeah, that's a dangerous thing. So, as you can see, these 5 forms of ignorance, they form a very dangerous sequence, right? So first, the soul becomes reluctant to the service of the Lord somehow, and then eventually the soul comes under the covering of ignorance, right? Desiring to become a competitor to the Lord, enjoying this material world, and then from this, the soul has to forget, right, his eternal spiritual identity, of course, and start to identify with a material body. And then the soul becomes attached to his birthplace, family, friends, material possessions, and so on. And this increases his illusion. And this makes the soul absorbed in the material duality of dividing things, classifying things into desirable and undesirable, friends and enemies, etc. And this makes him very active in the material platform, right? More and more entangled by envy, anger, and desire. And as a result, one becomes mad after sense enjoyment, like Mahamoha. That's the final one. And one gradually becomes more and more sinful, and gradually he falls into the lower species of life, where ignorance just increases more and more, makes him forget his original nature as a soul, right? So it's a very dangerous and sad path, right, for the soul. And then there is more. So it's not possible to enjoy the material world without falling into these varieties of illusion. and gradually gliding down to the lower species. So that's something very important to understand. The more one to become involved with sense gratification means to become involved with discoverings of ignorance. You can't separate these two. Without discoverings of ignorance, one can't enjoy his senses, or at least one is not propense to enjoy his senses. So we have to choose one side or the other. And if one goes to the side of sense enjoyment, then the tendency is that gradually, probably over a number of lives, he will gradually fall into the lower species, into the animal species, right? Because he becomes more and more sinful because of this sense gratification. And the only way to avoid this path, right, of going eventually to animal life is to gradually abandon our propensity to enjoy matter and to compete with Krishna, right? And by following the principles of the scriptures and gradually abandoning, right, this enjoying mentality. So the more we desire to enjoy in this material world, the more we forget about Krishna, right, and vice versa. And one may try to combine like both paths to a certain degree, right? Okay, a little bit of sense gratification, a little bit of Krishna consciousness. Okay, it's possible to a certain degree, but they don't go very well together. They go ill together. So in the beginning, okay, we can try to combine both, but ultimately one has to make his choice, where I want to go. So okay, so now we understand about discoverings of ignorance. And okay, Brahma created discoverings and what he did after creating discoverings. And then there is an interesting verse here, quote, out of disgust, Brahma threw off the body of ignorance, and taking this opportunity, Yakshasas and Rakshasas sprang for possession of the body, which continued to exist in the form of night. Night is the source of hunger and thirst. So unquote, right? That's the end. So, although Brahma performed his duty in creating discoverings of ignorance, he didn't like it. It was not pleasant to him. So, and thus he threw away the body that he used for this creation, right? And then the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, as well as other lower beings, who were created together with these different coverings of ignorance, they took possession of this body, right? And although living in the planetary system of Bhuvarloka, right, the planetary system that is directly above us, and being associated with Kuvera, the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, they are considered beings in the mode of ignorance. Like, and not only that, but they are cannibals. So, like, not so nice, right? So, so this body of Brahma became the night, right? Which is very much appreciated by all kinds of evil beings because the night increases their power and their activities. So night is also the source of hunger and thirst. And overpowered by this hunger and thirst, the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, they attacked Brahma, right? Trying to devour him. And Brahma had to beg them to stop, explain that he was their father. But it was close. Brahma was almost devoured by the Yakshasas and Rakshasas. So you see that being Brahma is also not easy, right? Quote. That's a quote from Prabhupada, 20 and 21. Quote. So Brahma, the head of the demigods, full of anxiety, asked them, do not eat me, but protect me. You are born from me and have become my sons. Therefore, you are the Yakshasas and Rakshasas. So Brahma then created the shining demigod, right? Jai, together with the effulgent daytime. So just like the Rakshasas, they took possession of the night, the demigods, they took possession of the day, right? And generally, beings in the mode of ignorance, they are active beings in the mode of goodness, they are active during the day, right? As well as the early hours of morning. And beings in ignorance, they're more active at night, right? And that's why one of the principles of spiritual life is to wake up early, to chant, and to perform other spiritual practices, right? And this helps us to situate ourselves in this state of consciousness, in goodness, right? It's very, very important for devotees. So Brahma then gave birth to the demons from his buttocks, right? From all parts of the bodies, from the body, that's from where the demons came. So demons, they are influenced by the mode of passion, and of course they're very attracted to sex. And Prabhupada mentions that, quote, the more one is free from the desire for sex, the more he's promoted to the level of the demigods. And the more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he's degraded to the level of demoniac life. So see, there are these two paths also. So because of their sexual appetite, right? The demons, they harass everyone. And even Brahma had problems with it. Because as soon as he created the demons, they became lustful. And they went after him for sex. And Prabhupada explains that demons, they are so fond of sex that they have no respect, even for their father. Anyone, man, woman, anyone can become target for their lust. And so when one's sexual impulse is controlled, then one can engage to it, right? Engage this impulse to beget children inside family life, like according to religious principles. But when one loses control over this sex desire, then there are no limits. Then, anything can happen. And Prabhupada explains, quote, the more one is free from the desire for sex, the more he is promoted to the level of the demigods, and the more one is inclined to enjoy sex life, the more he's degraded to demoniac life, right? Important quote. So at first, Brahma laughed at their foolishness, right? But as they came closer, Brahma became afraid and he ran out of fear, right? So he approached the Lord for protection. So this shows how the material world is a dangerous place, right? Even if one becomes Brahma, still there are dangers. So see, Brahma was, almost eaten. He was, harassed. So even Brahma suffers here. So, so then next verse, quote, Lord Brahma, approaching the Lord, addressed him thus, my Lord, please protect me from these sinful demons who were created by me under your order, being infuriated by an appetite for sex, and have come to attack me. Right? So yeah, so that's life. Unquote. So the Lord told Brahma to abandon the body that he used to create the demons, and he referred to it as impure. And Brahma immediately abandoned his body, and thus he was saved, right, from the demons, right? Because like without a body, you have anything to fear. So Prabhupada explains that Brahma abandoning these different bodies doesn't mean abandoning a physical body, but actually abandoning a particular type of mentality. Prabhupada makes this point in his purport. He says, quote, according to Sridhara Swami, Brahma's constant dropping of his body does not refer to his actually giving up his body. Rather, he suggests that Brahma gave up a particular mentality. Mind is the subtle body of the living entity. We may sometimes be absorbed in some thought which is sinful, but if we give up the sinful thought, it may be said that we give up the body. Brahma's mind was not in correct order when he created the demons. It must have been full of passion because of the entire creation was passionate. Therefore, such passionate sons were born. Unquote. So Brahma does not have a physical body like us, right? He performs the creation using his subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. However, as mentioned in the second canto, this subtle body, it assumes different forms that act like gross bodies according to his mental states. And as he changes between these different states of consciousness, these bodies, they are created and discarded, right? So it's not that literally he assumes a physical body, but his subtle body assumes a certain form that he can use to manipulate matter. And then when he changes his mentality, he kind of abandons this body and the subtle body assumes a different form. So the body that Brahma used uh, to create the demons, right, became the evening twilight, and that's a time of the day that inspire passion, right? So the asuras they took possession of this time, taking it as a beautiful damsel, right? So Prabhupada explains that quote. As early morning is the period for spiritual cultivation, the beginning of evening is the period for passion. So, several verses of the 20th chapter, they are dedicated to describing the physical features of this girl of the twilight and the way the lustful demons approached her. And these descriptions appear to describe the interactions of the demons with the predominating deity of the evening twilight, because there is the evening twilight as an energy, and every energy that is part of the material world has a predominating deity. So it appears that they were talking, this girl that they were talking to was the predominating deity of the evening twilight. But this also serves as a description of the mentality of the demons, right? Being enamored by the false beauty of this material world. So uh, this point about this, what is beauty, like material beauty, is quite interesting philosophical discussion, because we look to a person, right? And this person may look very beautiful to us. But if we cut out any piece of a beautiful material body, like a nail, a finger, a bunch of hair, a piece of skin, an eye, a tooth, etc., like any part of the body, if you cut out, we will not find any beauty there, right? Separated, all parts of a beautiful body, they are ghastly. Like imagine you take a very beautiful man or a beautiful woman and you cut this body into so many different parts and you put there, right? That's a terrifying vision, right? Like it's like a horror movie, right? It's completely ghastly, right? So when these material elements they are together, we, under the influence of material illusion, we find it attractive. But if we analyze, we see that actually there is no beauty there. So that's the mystery of how material illusion works. So anyway, demons they are very attracted by this false beauty of the material world, but a godly person learns to control such attraction and to see through this illusion by cultivating spiritual knowledge, right? So so having finished, this unpleasant part of creation, then Brahma developed his sense of loveliness. And with this, he gave birth to the Gandharvas and Apsaras, who are very fond of music and beauty, right? And as Brahma gave up the body that he used for this creation, it became the moonlight. And it was taken possession by the Gandharvas, right? So at some point, Brahma, he felt somehow lazy. And then from this laziness, he created the ghosts and the Psachas, the evil spirits. And these are beings who attack people who are impure. So, drunkards, these people who don't have good hygiene, they are often attacked by these evil spirits and they go crazy also. So, and when he gave up this body, it took the form of yawning, like like this, right? When we are tired. So, in a similar way, Brahma created the Sajas and the Pitas. So, and also the Siddhas and the Vijadaras, and the Kimpurushas and the Kinnaras. So the Sajas are a type of demigods who take charge of mantras and rituals. The Pitas are the spirits of the ancestors. They have their own planet there. They can continue living in this planet, in Pitriloka. If their descendants, they remain pious and they offer then oblations as prescribed in the Vedas, right? And the Siddhas, they are, and the Siddhas and the Vidyadharas also, they are inhabitants of the celestial planets. They have mystic perfections. They can travel in outer space. They can become invisible. And the Kinnaras and Kimpurushas, they are inhabitants of other islands of Bhumandala, apart from Earth, like other of the islands. And they have a very great artistic sense, and their forms, they are a mixture of human and animal forms, right? These are the uh, Kimpurushas. So then this was the creation of Brahma. Now we go to the creation of Manu. Brahma will finally create Manu, right? So the work of creation culminated with the creation of the Manus, and they were created from the sense of self-satisfaction of Brahma. So it is described that Brahma gave the Manus his own human form. And this is also significant because the human body is described as the best opportunity for a soul to regain his original identity as a servant of Krishna. And the Manus, they are the fathers of mankind, right? So in the animals as well as in the demoniac species of life, of course, there are little opportunity for self-realization. But even the demigods, they are constantly distracted by sense gratification. Therefore, in the human form, we have this ideal balance between suffering and enjoyment. And this balance can propel us back to Godhead. You see, that's what can bring us back to God. That's the perfect balance between these two things. And this is mentioned on Srimad Bhagavatam 320 verses 49 to 51. Quote, one day, Brahma, the self-born, the first living creature, felt as if the object of his life had been accomplished. At that time, he evolved from his mind the Manus, who promote the welfare activities of the universe. The self-proposed creator gave then his own human form. On seeing the Manus, who had been created earlier, the demigods, the Gandharvas, and so on, applauded Brahma, the Lord of the universe, right? And they prayed, O Creator of the universe, we are glad that you have produced no, pardon. So they are speaking that we are glad what you have produced is well done. Since ritualistic acts have now been established soundly in this human form, we shall all share the sacrificial oblations, right? So, apart from cultivating their own self-satisfaction, humans, they also have another purpose in the universal creation, which is to perform yagas that empower the demigods to proper administrate the universe. So by performing yagas, and especially the chanting of the holy names, right? That's the best yagas. Human beings cooperate with the demigods, so they can remain powerful and they can be capable of performing their administrative duties, right? Because when the sacrifices performed by human beings, they are interrupted because of the attacks of demons or the spread of irreligion, then the demigods, they became weakened, right? And then the situation of the whole universe deteriorates, right? So the performance of yaga is thus a very important part of the universal order, and it brings prosperity to both human beings and demigods, right? And this is something that Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. This is 3:10 to 12. He says, quote, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be do happy by this yaga, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you, and thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. So, unquote. So proper yagas, they consist of worshiping Lord Vishnu and offering the prasada to the demigods, right? And of course, in the age that we live, is extremely, costly and difficult to perform, proper Vedic yagas. But we can actually achieve even greater results by chanting the holy names congregationally, right? So Sankirtan is recommended as the best method of sacrifice, not only for Kali Yuga, but actually for all ages, right? Haribo. Then we have the next topic, the laws of Manu. And this is a little bit polemic topic, but since we are here, let's talk about it. So the main function of the Manus is to teach humanity to follow religious life and execute yagas, right? Performing thus our whole in creation. So amongst all forms of life that exist in the universe, humans, they are considered the most important because life on Earth is a kind of universal crossroads, right? Where we can choose what will be our path in future lives. So the ones who follow the devotional path, right, surrendering to Krishna, they have the best opportunity of returning back to Godhead. While the ones who follow the pious path, then they can take birth in the higher planets, celestial planets, higher planets, and then they continue their path of gradual evolution from there. However, the people who disregard the injunctions of the scriptures and they act in sinful ways, then they do the opposite. They pave their way to birth in lower forms of life, like animals, plants, and so on. Like 99.9999% of the souls in the universe, they're exactly in the lower species, right? Intelligent forms of life, they are minority in the universe. Also, they can go to the lower planets, they can go to hell, and this is a path that a soul can take, millions of lives to recover from. Right? Once you fall there, it's very difficult to come out. So the Manus, they transmit religious scriptures, such as the Manu Samhita, right? Why? To keep humanity in the proper path. So, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is described that millions of years ago, the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, it had been transmitted from Krishna to Vivasvan, and then Vivasvan in turn transmitted it to Manu, and Manu transmitted it to Ikshvaku, right? So you see, Manu transmitting a religious scripture to human society. And this happens at the beginning of the reign of Vaisvata Manu, the current Manu. And this is just an example of how the Manus, they transmit religious scriptures to human beings, right? And in this way, they act as teachers and guardians of the human race. So the Manus, they transmit many types of scriptures, not just the Manu Samhita. Manu Samhita is one of these scriptures. So, okay, so Manu also transmitted the Manu Samhita, right? And that's the original law book, which is rigidly followed by people in the previous eras. But now the original text is considered lost, right? Because different versions that are available, they are all adulterated in major or minor degree. And apart from that, there are problems with translations, right? So one who reads, some of the translations that are available, he will just be shocked by, barbaric punishments that are prescribed there. But these were not there originally. These were adulterations introduced in the Middle Ages by different interpreters, right? What the original text really says is not really known. Apart from that, there is the question of the Vaidika system, in contrast with the Pancharatrika system. So the Vaidika system prescribes strict rules, which the goal of preventing an enlightened society from degrading, right? And the Pancharatric system is the opposite. The Pancharatric system, it offers a flexible system that is destined to gradually elevate a degraded society. So you see, they go on opposite sense, on opposite uh, logics, right? So the Vedic system, it was practiced in previous ages, right? And this includes the Manu Samhita. The idea was to prevent people from degrading by keeping what was there. And the Pancharatric system is, and its much more flexible sets of rules is current, right? So Pancharatric system is for our age. Vajika system was for previous ages, especially Satya Yuga. And Prabhupada alerted his disciples to not try to follow the Manu Samhita, but at the same time, he mentioned in some of his purports that it would be good if eventually ordinary people they would follow it. And this may sound like an apparent contradiction, but the confusion is dispelled when we consider that the Manu Samhita itself emphasizes that many of the rules that are prescribed in the text, they're not for Brahmanas, right? They're not for Brahmanas and they are not for Vaishnavas, because Vaishnavas are also Brahmanas. So in other words, the rules of the Manu Samhita, they are applicable to a materialistic society. A spiritual society is supposed to be higher, is supposed to be guided by higher values for principles that apply to Brahmanas, right? So that's why Prabhupada said to his disciples, forget Manu Samhita, don't try to follow Manu Samhita. But he said in his purports at some points that, okay, if normal people would follow Manu Samhita, this would be good. It would be better than what they are doing now, right? So devotional service to the Lord is supreme dharma, right? And therefore, the rules and regulations of the process of devotional service, they actually supersede the laws of Manu, right? They fulfill the purpose of the laws of Manu, but they add more. They add something higher that is not offered by the laws of Manu, right? No, that's the meaning of super exceed. It fulfills the original purpose, but it gives something better on top, something extra, right? Thus, the main priority for us should be to teach devotees how to properly follow the process of Krishna consciousness and also to spread it to general public, right? So the moral principles prescribed in the Manu Samhita, if the general public would accept it, it could be like a stepping stone in the direction of this goal. But anyone desiring to implement it would have to first find an unadulterated copy of the text, which doesn't seem to be very possible nowadays. There is one edition nowadays that is this one here, you can see. Uh, right? The author is Patrick Olivelli. So this is a scholar. He's not like, as far as I know, he's not a devotee, but he did a relatively good job in separating the parts of the Manu Samhita that were adulterated. Uh, you can't, put your hand in the fire, but it's the best edition that is available as far as I know. I don't think there is really a better translation nowadays, unless some devotee really goes deep into it and decides to try to do it. Okay, then next one. How was the universe populated? So, okay, next topic. So, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described that Swayambhuva Manu, he had 5 children, right? 3 daughters and 2 sons. So the first daughter, Akuti, was giving marriage to the sage Ruchi, right? The middle daughter, Devahuti, to the sage Kardama, and the youngest, Prasuti, to Prajapati Daksha, right? And then from the 2 sons, the first, Priyavrata, he became a renunciant, and the second, Uttanapada, he became the father of Dhruva Maharaja and also his half-brother, Uttama, right? And by studying this description, one could question where the rest of humanity came from, right? As well as the animals, plants, and other beings who populated the different planets. Because early in the current day of Brahma, when Kardama Muni was meditating, right, before accepting Devahuti, the daughter of Manu, as his wife, the earth was not a desert, right? The Srimad Bhagavatam describes that his hermitage was a very beautiful place surrounded by all kinds of plants and animals and so on, right? So I'll read the description here. This is from 21, chapter 21, verses 40 to 44. So, quote, the shore of the lake was surrounded by clusters of pious trees and creepers, rich in fruits and flowers of all seasons, that afforded shelter to pious animals and birds, which uttered various cries. It was adorned by the beauty of groves of forest trees. The area resounded with the notes of overjoyed birds. Intoxicated bees wandered there, intoxicated peacocks proudly danced, and merry cuckoos called one another. Lake Bindu-Sarovara was adorned by flowering trees such as Kadamba, Champaka, Ashoka, Karanja, Babula, Ashana, Kunda, Mandala, Kutaja, and young mango trees, and the air was filled with the pleasant notes of Charandava ducks, plavas, swans, ospreys, waterfowl, cranes, chacaravakas, and chacoras. Its shores abounded with deer, boars, porcupines, gavayas, elephants, baboons, lions, monkeys, mongooses, and musk deer. So similarly, when Utanapada, right, the son of Manu, became the king, even before, begetting his children, there were already people living on the planet. So from where did they come, right? So the point is that the Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as the other Puranas, they don't speak much about the direct creation of human beings. Just like it doesn't speak much about the creation of lower animals and other species. Because although it may sound interesting for us, this is not considered a very important topics for the sages who transmitted, the scriptures. In the Tattva Sandarbha, Shuladeva Goswami, he mentions that all the 18 Puranas, they were compiled by Srila Vyasadeva from a much larger books of 1 billion verses. Imagine, 1 billion verses. It's quite a long book. And this book with 1 billion verses, this big Purana, this original Purana, it is studied in the higher planets by the demigods, right? So understanding that it would be impossible for us to study such a large book, Vyasadeva, he compiled the 18 Puranas, taking only the most relevant parts useful for different classes of people. So in this way, the original 1 billion verses, from these 1 billion verses, like we have access to 18 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and a total of about 400,000 if we add all the other Puranas, right? So it's understood that human beings, animals, and plants, they have existed in different planets since the beginning of the universe. But the scriptures that we have access to on our planet, they don't speak so much about them because they focus in describing the activities of great personalities who transmitted important spiritual knowledge, right? However, just because something is not like comprehensively described in the scriptures, it doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen, right? It's just that it was not so important. So the creation of different species of life happens repeatedly thanks to the 7 great sages, as well as other Prajapatis, like Daksha, for example, in cooperation with their wives. And they repeatedly populate and repopulate the universe. So, for example, in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 6, there is a description of how the 60 daughters of Daksha gave birth to most of the population of the universe at that time, like from plants to demigods. For example, Timi gave birth to different aquatics, Sarama to ferocious animals like tigers and lions, Ila to different creepers and trees, Aditi gave birth to the demigods, Diti gave birth to the demons, Matrika gave birth to the human species, and so on, right? So this description from the sixth canto narrates events from later, from the reign of Chaksusamanu, from the sixth Manvantara. This is when after Daksha took his second birth and started again his job of creation. But the universe is populated in a similar way by different Prajapatis at every Manvantara, starting from the reign of Swayambhuva Manu. And Brahma himself, he creates the species at the beginning of his day as a blueprint or as a seed. And then the Prajapatis, they take charge of bringing forth generations of living entities and increasing their population. So during the day of Brahma, different species are repeatedly extinct and later repopulated by the Prajapatis. So this analogy of seed is something interesting because a seed a seed already contains a plant, right? There is a plant inside the seed, right? But to grow and to develop, this plant has to be planted in the right conditions. So, with the exception of his mental sons, Brahma doesn't directly create living entities. What he does is to create the seeds, so to say, of different species of life and give them to the Prajapatis, right? And then these Prajapatis, they bring forth generations of living entities as necessary, right? So even if certain species they become extinct at a certain point, the seed still exists. It's still there with the Prajapatis. And in this way, the Prajapatis, they can repopulate the universe at any point. And of course, when we speak about seed, right, this is just like an imperfect analogy, right, to try to explain, some very complicated concept. But in reality, we are not speaking about like a physical object, but some kind of subtle manifestation. Another example that can be given is like a project or a blueprint. So creating something is not necessarily the same as producing it, right? A person may project a car, right, and then give the project to some company that may produce it, or different companies may produce the car at the same time or at different points in time, right? But the point is that as soon as the project is made, the car already exists, and it continues existing as long as the project is circulating around, right? And different companies, they may produce this car at different times, right? So similarly, Brahma, he creates the different forms of life, and then the Prajapatis, they produce them as necessary, right? So for example, we learned that there were human beings living on Earth since the beginning of the reign of Swayambhuva Manu, leading to the reign of Uttanapada, right? And so and then this led to the progress during the reign of Prithu Maharaj and so on. However, as narrated in the fourth canto, when the Prachetas, they came out of the ocean, right, at the end of their austerities, the planet was covered by trees. Apparently, there were no human beings there at this time. Like, apparently, human beings that went extinct at that point. So by the arrangement of the demigod Soma, they got married to Marisa, right, the daughter of an Apsara called Padmalochan, and they begot Daksha, right? This is the second birth of Daksha. However, Daksha didn't have children immediately. He practiced austerities until the sixth Manvantara, and only then he had this he produced his 60 daughters and got then married to great sages and repopulated the universe right after the destruction at the end of the fifth Manvantara, right? This is from the sixth canto. This is for later. But the point is that in the meantime, while Daksha was meditating, Swayambhuva Manu, he had to ask Priyavrata, the other son, the older brother of Uttanapada, who had taken sannyas, to abandon his practice of austerities and go back, accept the responsibility of managing Bhumandala and bringing forth, new generations of human beings. And he did, which he did, of course, in cooperation with his wife. So you see that there is a constant struggle, to keep the universe populated, because there are so many things happening, and extinctions and disasters and species they disappear, and then someone has to populate it then again, and it goes on like that the whole day of Brahma. It's not an easy thing to maintain the universe. So, as we can see, the creation of Brahma is done just once at the beginning of his day. But the work of the Prajapatis is continuous, like it follows the different cycles of devastation that our universe passes through. So there is one devastation at the end of the reign of each Manu, and this affects not only our planet, but also the populations of demigods and demons. Then there is a small devastation of each Kali at the end of each Kali Yuga, and this affects our planet. Like after this, the planet is repopulated, and so on. So there are different events during the day of Brahma. So in this way, the Prajapatis, as well as the Manus and other higher beings, they're, like I said, they're constantly engaged, right, in creating new populations, maintaining the proper conditions for existence of life all over the universe, and so on. So they are always busy. And in his purport to 428.10, Prabhupada, he makes an important point, interesting point. So he says, quote, "From the Vedic history of creation, we can understand that the first living creature was Lord Brahma, who created the 7 great sages and other Prajapatis to increase the universal population. Thus, every living entity, according to karma, his past desires and activities, gets a particular type of body. From that of Brahma to that of a microbe or germ in stool." Unquote. So here, Prabhupada mentions the 7 great sages, right? The Saptarishi, who together with Daksha and the Manus are considered like the main Prajapatis. So from the Srimad Bhagavatam, we receive details about the history of Daksha, but the 7 sages, they are mentioned much more like sparingly. So the original 7 sages of the universe, they were Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, and Brigu, like 7. So these were 7 direct sons of Brahma, and they resided in the 7 stars below Dhruvaloka, right? And these stars, they are part of the planetary system of Maharloka. And in his Satsandarbha, Srila Goswami, he mentions that each team of 7 sages executes their functions as Prajapatis for a whole Manvantara, right? More than 300 million years. And at the end of the Manvantara, the sages, they are promoted to Janaloka. And there they can live until the final devastation of the universe. They are not destroyed at the end of the day of Brahma. So as we studied previously, our universe is divided into 14 levels of planetary systems, going from Patalaloka to Brahmaloka, right? And the 7 lower planetary systems, they are inhabited by demons. Then the 8th, Brahmandala, it's inhabited by human beings. Then the 9th, Bhuvarloka, is inhabited by subtle beings like the Yakshasas and Rakshasas. And then the 10th, Swargaloka, is inhabited by the demigods, right? So all these 10 planetary systems up to Swargaloka, they are affected by the devastations at the end of each Manvantara. And also they are completely destroyed at the end of each day of Brahma. The other planetary systems, Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka, they are created only once at at each of the two halves of the day of Brahma, right? So Brahma created then at the beginning of his life, and he created again at the beginning of the current day, that is the first day of the second half of his life. So only two times they are created. And then after that, they exist until the complete devastation of the universe. So okay, so the seven sages, they are promoted to Janaloka at the end of the Manvantara. So what happened after that? After that, a new team of seven sages takes charge, right? Just like in the case of the demigods. So it's mentioned, and that's Srimad Bhagavatam 8:13 verses 15 to 16, that some of the great personalities mentioned in the Mahabharata, such as Parashurama, Aswatthama, Kripacharya, Vyasadeva, they are currently engaged in meditation in Badalikashrama, preparing themselves to assume posts amongst the seven sages in the next Manvantara, just like Bali Maharaj is also waiting to assume the post of Indra. So one could question how human beings like Aswatthama, Kripacharya, how they can become Prajapatis without changing their bodies, right? To go all the way to live there in Mahaloka. But the main question is not the body, but their consciousness. Once the consciousness is purified, the body can also be purified. So the first group of seven sages, just like Daksha, Narada, and the four Kumaras, and the Swayambhuva Manu, they were direct sons of Brahma. But the Prajapatis in the next Manvantaras, like the second, third, and so on, they are descendants of these first seven sages. So in his first birth, for example, Daksha was a son of Brahma, right? But in his second birth, he was born out of the Prachetas, who in turn were descendants of Uttanapada, right? The son of Swayambhuva Manu, and so on and so forth. So, for example, the current Manu Vaisvata, he's the son of Vivasvan, for example, if I'm not mistaken. So it goes on like this. There is a genealogical order, right? So in this way, different personalities, they take the roles of Prajapatis in different Manvantaras, and they repopulate, the lower planetary systems, lower, I mean, up to Swargaloka when it's needed, right? So at the end of the current day of Brahma, the ones who qualify, right, they will be promoted, like the demigods and others who are qualified, they will be promoted to the highest planetary systems, like Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, and there they will live until the final devastation of the universe. And after such a long life, the ones who qualify, they will be able to attain the final destination, right? Go to reach the spiritual planets. And just last topics for today. So one cold question, how the Prajapatis, who are like evolved human beings living the higher planetary systems, they can give birth to lower animals and to plants who have, completely different bodily structures. For example, Sarama, she gave birth to tigers and lions, for example, right? But nor she or her husbands, they are tigers, right? So how is that? How does it work? So the point is that the Vedas explain that more evolved beings, they have the capacity to generate less evolved beings, like a Prajapati generating a tiger, for example. But the opposite doesn't happen, right? So life in the universe, it starts thus from the most evolved being, like Brahma, and in turn, he generates slightly less evolved beings, like the Prajapatis, for example, and who in turn generate all the other less evolved species of life. And this is something that can be observed even in your planet, right? Human beings, they can manipulate less evolved organisms using artificial insemination, genetic genetic manipulation and so on. Like, for example, a human being can clone a chip or create a GMO soy seed, for example, but a human being will never be able to create a demigod, for example, right? So we can play with beings that are less than us, but we can't create anything that is more than us. So we can see that this is essentially the opposite of what is believed in the modern evolution theory, right? Which says that life gradually evolved, no, forms of life, they gradually produce more evolved forms. And this starts from inanimate matter, right? Inanimate matter somehow produce very simple unicellular organisms, and then gradually they evolve into more complex species and culminating with human beings, like Jai, right? So one may have a different opinion, but now I personally believe that this description of the Bhagavatam makes much more sense. You need much less faith to believe, what Bhagavatam says than to believe what science says in terms of creation. No, it's much more logical to just believe that, yeah, there is a higher being who made a lower being than to imagine that, human beings, they came from inanimate matter, even if we imagine a very long process. So another possible objection here is my use of the word evolved. Like, for example, when I say that human beings are more evolved than animals like tigers and lions, it may appear that it supports the theory of evolution of Darwin, right? But that's not actually the case, because Prabhupada makes the point that the Vedas also offer a theory of evolution. It's just that it's different from what Darwin wrote, right? It's different theory of evolution, different principle. The Vedic idea is that the soul gradually evolves from unicellular organisms to plants, insects, birds, lower animals, and so on, and eventually reaches the human species. And in this way, when we speak about human beings being more evolved than lower animals, we are just referring to this process of spiritual evolution of the soul, right? The soul transmigrating through different types of bodies, going from less evolved living beings all the way to Brahma, right? The most evolved. Okay, so this is it for today. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gaura Premanande. Haribo. Hare Krishna. Jai.